American Feed Industry Association is a really unique organization in that we're really diverse. So our 650 members represent everything from feed manufacturers and pet food manufacturers to those who make the equipment that go into the feed mills, to the ingredient suppliers, and pharmaceuticals. So we're really diverse. So what it means for me is that I have to be a really good consensus builder amongst our membership. But it makes us a powerhouse organization in that we can bring a lot of different perspectives to the table.
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast from North Carolina State University's Animal Food Manufacturing Program. I'm Adam Farnells. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening on your podcast app of choice or watching us on YouTube. Please do like, subscribe, all of those good things, and let us know in the comments what you are liking about the various different topics we're discussed or what you'd like to hear more from so that we can keep this podcast interesting to you. Excited today. We've got a return guest to the podcast. Our guest is Constance Cullman. Constance is the president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association. So we're going to get to talk some today about things that are impacting the feed industry kind of from an overall perspective. Constance, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for allowing me to join you here today, Adam.
If you wouldn't mind, and again, you've joined us before, but for those that might have not seen that previous one, just a little bit of your background and how you came to be working there at AFIA.
Well, I'm a lifetime agricultural advocacy professional. So I started out working for university too, Adam. So I was also doing some extension work originally in my career, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to work for farmers, agribusinesses that are doing work in the agricultural space, and then ultimately ending up here after a short stint in the government.
Excellent. And so your role at AFIA, obviously I said president and CEO, but what does that kind of encompass at an organization like the AFIA?
Well, the American Feed Industry Association is a really unique organization in that we're really diverse. So our 650 members represent everything from feed manufacturers and pet food manufacturers to those who make the equipment that go into the feed mills, to the ingredient suppliers, and pharmaceuticals. So we're really diverse. So what it means for me is that I have to be a really good consensus builder amongst our membership. But it makes us a powerhouse organization in that we can bring a lot of different perspectives to the table. So my job is making sure that we hear what our members need and make sure we're representing to the best of our ability their priorities and sharing what challenges policy issues bring for them in their efforts to do business.
Evonik Animal Nutrition is committed to ensure food security and safety while reducing the ecological footprint of animal farming. Its products and services use evidence-based solutions that seek to promote animal welfare and reduce reliance on natural resources. All this is underpinned by long-standing industry partnerships and deep customer understanding. Evonik's focus on efficiency, sustainable, healthy nutrition, and collaborations with livestock farming partners creates value for customers and consumers.
And I think to that point, and for those that may not be fully familiar with AFIA, though feed is in the name, the organization is involved in feed and pet food, and then of course everything that goes into feed and pet food, which means all the ingredients and all the ingredient processors, and all of that ends up coming under kind of the umbrella of AFIA's various different organizational structures, which is something I wanted to ask you about before we get into some questions about the industry. I know you guys are working through some of those things now and what your organization looks like. And can you just give the audience a bit, for those that may not be fully familiar or should be more familiar, what are the different things that AFIA does across kind of that lobbying side of things and the education side of things? And what are the different ways that AFIA is kind of there for its member companies?
Absolutely. We started over almost 120 years ago because there was a lot of concern about the various regulatory programs from state to state. Ironically, that's still a lot of what we do, is working to harmonize regulations, but we really represent our members mostly at the federal level. So we will work with Congress, we work with the different agencies that have a regulatory role in safeguarding animal food safety. and the supply. And we really are on the Hill quite a bit. We're reaching out to other governments around the world when they are doing something that affects our members' ability to do business here. And so that is the big part of what we do. But as always, needs change for members throughout the years. And we also provide two other major services. We do a lot of educational programming, keeping folks up to date on things that are happening and hitting them from everything from the tariffs and helping them navigate and understand what is actually being subject to a tariff and what's not, to helping them understand what they need to have in place when an inspector comes into their plant. So we do a lot of that. We convene meetings where our industry can come together and do business. So a lot of networking events and ability to keep our industry connected. And that's really important when you have such a diverse membership like we do. And then we also provide expertise for folks. When they have a question, they need to understand how to navigate a regulation or get a product exported and they can't get an export certificate. They call us, and we help navigate those challenges for them.
And for those that are listening and watching, and I told Constance we were going to try to keep this somewhat evergreen, but just for fun, it is currently the end of June 2025, and so if you're watching this soon after we're recording it, you kind of have an idea of how busy when Constance says AFIA is up on the hill, what that might look like right now. And if you're watching this far later, do a quick Google search and figure out what was going on up on the hill in June 2025. And with that, kind of jump into some specifics to the animal food industry. There's obviously a lot of different moving parts to our industry and a lot of challenges, but in your perspective, what are some of those biggest challenges that are currently facing the animal food industry?
Well, there are several, and they can change on a pretty regular basis, Adam. But when we look longer term, our priorities really remain pretty consistent, because the biggest challenge right now is our ability to bring new innovations to the marketplace. And that really feeds into our ability to improve animal health, to address sustainability or conservation needs that our customers have, to being able to actually improve the safety of food as well as animal food. So when we talk about regulations, it's not a small thing. And the thing I think that is most frustrating, and I think you could ask any regulated industry in the country about this, and that is the ability of regulations to keep up with the innovation and the advancements of science within the private sector. So when we take a look at our primary regulatory agency, the Food and Drug Administration, and more specifically the Center for Vet Medicine, a lot of those regulatory pathways are outdated and they're not aligned with our current animal nutrition science. So we have a lot of really lengthy, unpredictable, and I'm going to come back to that predictability concept quite a bit during our conversation today, Adam. Lengthy, unpredictable approval processes that really delay the launch of a lot of these innovative feed ingredients, particularly those that have non-nutritive benefits. So what I mean by that is we have a lot of products that can improve food safety, reduce the salmonella shedding, for example, as one type of product, improves the overall environmental profile, or it improves and enhances animal welfare. And we can't bring those to the market because those have to go through a drug route rather than a feed ingredient route. And it operates in the digesta of the animal or the gut of the animal. So we definitely view that as a feed ingredient. That's one of the big things we're really working on. And we're hoping that the Innovative Feed Act will make it through this Congress and be passed, because that will allow FDA to modernize its review process. It'll create a new category for animal food ingredients that improve health, food safety, or sustainability, even though it doesn't contribute to nutrition, which is the old-fashioned way of looking at every feed ingredient.
For sure. And we obviously end up in this situation where, as you said, a lot of these regulations somewhat because of just time and also because of the burden of getting the regulations written and into the register and all those kinds of things. They don't change at the same speed that we can as an industry change and are forced to change to keep up with the needs. So how does an organization like AFIA position itself to say, okay, here's how we can help make these things actually happen for the benefits of our industry and then obviously downstream the consumers?
Well, we understand that for the government agencies, it can be challenging to keep up with the innovations and the advancements that we're seeing in the industry. So we actually position ourselves as a resource. Even though we're a regulated community, we also view ourselves as a partner and able to bring insights to the federal government about what is happening, how these products work, how they don't work in some instances, and be able to be that resource to the agency. In doing so, we can provide them important input as they shape guidance instead of it being a regulatory action. A lot of times things come through in guidance, how they review and look at submissions that companies put in to be able to get a product cleared for marketing. And we really, like I said, try to be that kind of resource. We also provide feedback to the regulating agencies over what's not working out in the field. And that's a really important function that we think we serve. And when things are just not making sense, we pipe up. We get in there and we share that. We push back. We provide a lot of counterpoint to some of the things that are happening as regulations get developed. And we try to make sure that whatever comes out is fit for purpose. So it does what the agency says it wants to do, but it also is workable. And it is able to be something that is adopted and yet still by the industry without completely disrupting the business and achieve the actual objective of the regulation.
How do you go about getting that feedback to provide back to those regulatory agencies or those that might be considering, how they want to vote on a particular law, all of those things that would be involved in, for lack of a better term that would encompass everything, lobbying. And I know it's not all lobbying per se, but I would assume that part of AFIA's role there is companies have a concern and an issue, but they don't exactly want to, poke their head up out of the grass and say, hey, I'm the one with the concern and the issue. Right. And so I'd assume that that's a part of the role here is making sure that your membership not only has a pathway, but utilizes that pathway and says, hey, when we have a concern, we need you to bring it to us. It's kind of like we would say students sitting in a classroom here at the university, right? If you have a question, somebody else in the room has a question. Don't think you're the only one with it, right?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times, what we do is we talk a lot, right? We talk a lot to our members. And whether that's, we may get a call from a member that raises a specific issue. And just like that student in your classroom, we look around and we start calling up our members and asking if they're seeing the same challenge or the same problem. And then that allows us to understand whether that's an individual challenge or whether it's a systemic problem with the way the system and the regulations being administered. We also have one of my favorite features of AFIA are our committee structures, our committees. And we do a lot of work because each of our committees has 15 industry members sitting at each committee. And we work through a lot of these issues and we pressure test what our solutions are that we bring to the federal government. And that is probably the most effective tool we have in our toolbox is that connectivity with the members through organized discussions and debates about how these different regulatory or proposed policies affect our members and what needs to happen to make it a workable solution for both food safety as well as our ability to survive as businesses.
As someone who has, had the opportunity as a university, I forget what we call ourselves, affiliate with AFIA. I've had the opportunity to sit on some of those committees long term as kind of a representative, so we can listen and learn and figure out where we can help provide. And I would echo that 100%. The amount of times that there's a discussion in the committee and there's either some amount of surprise by others on the committee of, wait, you're having that come up? That seems bizarre. Or there's surprise by whoever is voicing the concern when they find out that half the people around the table are going, oh, yeah, we're dealing with that too. And they thought, oh my God, I thought I was all by myself. And I think I'd echo exactly what you said. It seems really valuable to get those folks in a room, and because otherwise everybody's, so busy and the nature of the business and whatnot, that you're not taking the time otherwise to do those things. And so it gives a really nice opportunity to do that might not otherwise occur.
And honestly, Adam, we're not out there in the plants, right? We're not in the facilities manufacturing these products or creating these new innovations. So we really rely on our members and our dialogue and communication with our members to be able to accurately represent what they're concerned about and what they're dealing with out there. And so, yeah, it's, like I said, it's my favorite feature of AFIA, and it is critically important for us to be able to accurately represent what's happening in the space.
My guest again today is Constance Cullman. Constance is the president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association, AFIA. Slightly shifting gears, but not necessarily like leaving the regulatory space. One of the things that's also tricky, and we kind of alluded to it already about our industry in total, is that we have ingredient manufacturers that encompass people mining things out of the ground to people running bioreactors and everything in between, it seems like, right? And we have people doing pet food, which can mean all kinds of things from cat and dog and raw and rabbit and exotic and whatever else, to livestock feed manufacturers, and that it means commercial and integrated, which means that our businesses go out in all these kind of different ways, and our businesses have different needs based on all of those different scales and species being fed and whatever else the case may be. And then we have, in some cases, very specific and strict regulations that it's hard for everybody to fit under. And we also have, in some cases, very different regulations that it's well, I have to comply with this and that. How am I supposed to do that? So what kind of things are kind of on your radar from the standpoint of laws, regulations, rules that are needed to kind of address that harmonization of our different business entities?
Well, that's a whole lot to unpack there, Adam.
Sure. Yep. Long question.
So I'm going to take it in a couple of different directions, if that's all right. I'd like to talk about that from a harmonization of some of the different international trade issues and policies that we have, because certainly we have businesses that are producing for both the domestic market as well as the international market. And then I also want to touch on some of the different directions that are coming from different agencies within the United States. And so we'll take that first one first, just to stay on theme with what we were talking about. And right now it's incredibly confusing. I'm just going to say it's very unpredictable right now, because we have the objective to be able to make sure that we're still producing a nutritional, affordable, safe product for animals consumption, whether they're pets or livestock. And then we also have directions coming at us from the MAHA movement within the HHS, which FDA is under HHS. So within the same agency, we have some differing objectives and directions coming at us. So while we're trying to produce food very efficiently and sustainably so that we're utilizing our resources the best, we also are getting some conflicting messages and direction through different parts of the government. So I think those are the times where you really need to be able to work across the different agencies, have that interagency process, encourage the agencies to get together and talk a lot more than what they are naturally inclined to do, and help them understand that these kind of conflicting directions are very, very challenging for us. So I can dig into that a little bit more if you'd like, but those are that conflicting thing that we're seeing right now with these different agendas has been somewhat challenging for us.
Does addressing that take on almost a similar, I'm just kind of imagining this. Does it almost take on a similar idea as to what you were describing about like AFIA's own internal committees, where it's like, hey, can we please get all of you in the same room? And you're going to find out that you and you aren't saying the same thing, and this is going to be news to you.
Yes, it very much is. And a lot of times we will give USDA a call and say, hey, we appreciate the fact that you're looking to be able to make some advancements and help farmers better utilize their inputs and their resources. But did you recognize that over here we have a different approach over at FDA on how these things need to be reviewed? And so right now, we can't meet your goals and your targets over at USDA because we're not being able to get the support and the regulatory approach that we need over at FDA. That's vice versa as well. Right now, we are working very hard to be able to work on reducing salmonella shedding. Huge priority for USDA. Can't get a product approved over at FDA. So those are great examples.
You also mentioned some of the harmonization that does or needs to go on from the business standpoint when we talk about international and we talk about trade and we talk about global competition and we talk about, importing ingredients and animal food as kind of a collective term into the U.S. And obviously we produce things here that we would like to ship out and go to countries where things would buy. And I think by and large, as an industry, other than some very specific parts and very specific people in companies, while we might have a pretty good idea of, how we manufacture and how we sell and move and what the nutrition is, not a lot of folks on that would consider themselves experts on that international trade part of things that either impact us directly or that impact us, 4 steps down the road. So where, I know that's a priority of AFIA, and that there, in fact, you have kind of an entire segment that is devoted to that. Can you talk a little bit about like how critical is it that we maintain that, and what happens when those things fall apart? And then what do you see as that long-term viability of the international market for the animal food sector?
Well, it has to remain viable. We don't have a choice on that. We have got to be able to engage in international trade and international business across the board. It is the way that we are able to continue to be efficient and provide the kind of high quality product that we do domestically and internationally. So it's really important that we get this right. And so AFIA does spend a lot of time, whether we're working with international bodies and making sure that the international standards that get set in those international bodies are compatible with what we do here in the United States. We cannot afford to have, in many times, European style approaches to regulating products become international standards to which the United States would have to apply. Great example of that is the Europeans' approach to regulating is oftentimes hazard-based, which means that if something is a hazard, then you can't use it. We do a risk assessment approach here in the United States, which means we take the hazard of the product, and then we look at that in context of what is the exposure, to that, and that's how we get the risk of that. A great example, and Adam, I'm sure you've heard this many times, is water can be a huge hazard if there's too much of it. But without some of it, we're in a whole lot of trouble. We got to have that water to survive and live. And it's the same way. It's the exposure that makes the risk and the problem there. So one of the things we really try hard to do is make sure that we take a scientifically rigorous approach to how we look and participate in the settings of international standards. The other thing we're really working hard to do is get some harmonization across our major trading partners and us on how we bring products to market. I mentioned the Innovative Feed Act. Ironically, the rest of the developed world is actually bringing these products to the market as feed ingredients. United States is the only one that's not, and so that just doesn't work for us. And so that is one thing we're really working hard to try to make sure happens. And we also know that some of our challenges start overseas and then gets imported into the United States. So again, it's maintaining that first line of defense so that we continue to have a risk-based, scientifically valid approach to how we review products, how we look at products, and how we make sure that what we're bringing to the market meets the needs of our customers and the safety requirements that we live in and die by.
And this is probably the last question, and we'll wrap it up. Obviously, also just involved in trade is in addition to harmonizing the regulatory world and making sure that we can use ingredients in one place and feed in another and these sorts of things. We also are going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, the market has created this situation, and you can, like it or not, but an importer of certain things in order to make animal food, amino acids, vitamins, and certain minerals, we don't manufacture here. And so while it's easy to say, like, it'd be much better if it was all just coming from the US. Maybe it would be, and maybe 20 years from now we're down that path, but immediately that doesn't work. And so where do you get to play a role in, kind of raising your hand and saying, hey, before we consider across the board positions with trading partners, can we please understand that if we can't, import this or that you're going to have a real problem with, for example, the feeding of animals? Where do you guys get to play a role in that kind of a discussion?
We're actually playing a leading role in that discussion, Adam. And this is not something that affects just the feed industry, but is certainly something that we're seeing throughout the agricultural supply chain. And that is when you have an over-reliance on a single source for critical components of the production system, you start to have a problem. And so it's created a bit of a challenge for us because over the last 10 years, China and Chinese companies have become the predominant producer of vitamins. We estimate anywhere between 78 to 85% of all vitamins either are exported from or components of it originate in China. And it's not a concern necessarily with China. It's a concern with having such a huge percentage of your production of a product in the hands of one country. We are also seeing that problem grow with amino acids. So they are rapidly becoming dominant in the production of critical amino acids. And so we are raising the alarm, quite frankly, in Washington, D.C. We are pointing out that we need to have some diversity of supply just for resiliency. COVID was a huge wake-up call for the entire world. And what it showed us was that any supply chain disruptions can be hugely impactful to our ability to do business. It costs billions of dollars and make it very difficult for us to produce. Our concern is that with the growing geopolitical tensions that we see around the world, that if for some reason, even if just a percentage of our supply is interrupted, of vitamins, right now we've got no ability to actually produce animal feed in a way that keeps animals healthy. And those vitamins are also critically important for human nutrition as well. This isn't just an animal food issue. So we're leaning in hard. We're visiting with multiple agencies across the government. We're visiting with Congress. We're supporting the Securing American Agricultural Act that is in Congress that directs USDA to take a good look at where are our vulnerabilities in the ag supply chain. And we're really pushing this as a challenge. At the same time, as you said, tariffs are an issue because if it's a little bit of a challenge of how do you navigate through this short period where we're hoping to find a solution to that dominance. But at the same time, we can't afford huge tariffs on the products when we can't produce it here.
A little bit of, hey, this is a problem that we have that we may be able to take advantage of in order to kind of influence people, see why this is such a bad idea. but at the same time, but we can't shut it all down right away because that's not how manufacturing works. And trying to figure out how to thread that needle, and obviously, the folks again that are making the rules and passing the laws, they can't be experts on everything, and so that's where groups like AFIA come in and say, hey, we don't expect you all to be experts on animal feed. We're the experts. Here's what do you need to know, and give you that information.
Exactly. There's an old joke that advocacy is not really advocacy, it's education. And so everyone kind of says that a little bit tongue in cheek, but you know what? It's absolutely true. We look at ourselves first and foremost as an educator about the industry.
With that, we'll end our conversation for today. Again, my guest has been Constance Cullman. Constance is the president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association. Constance, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
My name's Adam Fernholz, and from North Carolina State University. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you the next time.